as I always say, grab a relaxing drink, sit in a comfy position. Today I'm having hibiscus drink. I've been having it throughout this week, and it's a perfect drink for the summer. Although it's been quite a cooler week, we've not had a heat wave here in Manchester in a bit, so I've been enjoying it. But I just had one sip, and I've been having it every morning, and so I thought, what better drink to have by my side today while speaking with you and catching up with you. We'll just give a few more minutes for everyone to join us. So, how was your week? Did you manage to go through the playlists for the acts of friendship? Today, I'm going to be talking about 7 things that your friendships might be trying to teach you. Now, I did say last week that we've concluded the series, but while reflecting on it, these are a few things that I have learned myself. So this today is going to be a bit more conversational. I'll be sharing some of my experiences, which many of you will be able to relate to. As much as our experiences are different, as like our faces and lives are different, I believe when it comes to relationships and friendships, there is a similarity. There's always that connecting thread. There's going to be something that I share from my experience that you will be able to resonate with. I'm sure of that. So yeah, I hope my alignment and everything is good. Yeah, I think this is much better. Yeah, so I'm in the middle now. Good. So yeah. So we're 2 minutes in. I'm going to try to keep this short because there are 7 things. I want them to be memorable for you. And I'm going to be journeying you through experiences from my uni days, my teenage years. I was a teenager in uni. And afterwards, up until today, now I am in my 30s. So sit back and enjoy. I'm going to be joining you through 7 things, like I said. We're going to be looking at, the importance of difference and how you can use that. The whole idea of this discussion is for you to be able to see how much you have grown. It's not necessary to call out who was a bad or good friend, because at the end of the day, you are not as innocent as you would want to claim. Same goes for me. So this has helped me to do a lot of reflection, and these are lessons that I'll carry with me in my future friendships, and I believe that they would benefit you as well. Once you're able to hold on to these seven things that they may be trying to tell you, you approach your relationships a lot differently than how you have been in the past, and you will be more open to change. You will be more welcoming of difference. You will also be wary of comparison and negative assessment, jealousy. You will also know how to tailor your generosity. In the episode about generosity, I did go into talking about the different kinds of generosity that there are and how we can apply them in our friendships and relationships. I talked a bit more about boundaries. So for more details on that aspect, I would encourage you to watch Acts of Friendship. I think that was episode 2, which was generosity. And I'll be talking about, of course, a bit about boundaries and how to notice the cues and changes in your body from an interaction or a relationship that is telling you need to pull back or you need to pull forward. And of course, coming to the point of acceptance, because one of the things that keeps us longer in friendships that should have ended or causes us to struggle more than we should is because we refuse to accept the reality for what it is. But once we're able to accept it for what it is, you'll be able to approach it in a way that grows you and equips you with what you need to enter into your future relationships and friendships. So, bit of a disclaimer now, which is something that should pretty much be obvious, but I'm going to say it. In this story, I'll also be touching about, accountability stories, I beg your pardon, I'll be touching on accountability and where I think and I know that I could have made better decisions. The beauty about life is that with each unfolding day, we are growing and we are changing, and the experiences that we have when we learn from them develop us to be better versions of ourselves. So, this is me sharing my lessons with you, sharing my journey with you to equip you to be the friend that you would want to have, to be the person that you would want to have in your life. So let's start off. So I said I'm going to be talking about from uni, friendships that changed, friendships that ended, friendships that became distant, friendships where I had to examine my own behavior as a former ghoster. You know, that is not a past that I'm very proud of. If you those of you wondering what that means, I used to avoid conflict so much that if I played out the conversation in my head that the conflict was going to escalate in a way that I didn't want to be part of, I was always willing to put an end to the relationship instead of addressing that conflict. So it was more so like, now I understand it. More so like leaving people with wondering what happened, why did that happen, why did that cut off this and that. But this was me not being mature enough to approach conflicts and be willing to go through them. Of course, when we talk about conflict, I had to, by the way, I've been learning a lot about that. So there's been a lot of reading and growing that has come from that, which is why I'm grateful to God that I'm no longer that person. But one of the things, when you find out that you avoid, you can avoid to the extent that what the confrontations that are meant to bring you closer to a person, you avoid them altogether and fulfill that relationship altogether, leaving the person hurt and leaving yourself hanging, and of course wounded, and taking that wound into the next friendship or relationship. So thankfully, that was one of the things God called out and said, no, you're going to need to, in this healing journey, you've asked me to heal your heart, you've asked me to heal your soul. We're going to take it step by step, and there will be some difficult conversations that you're going to need to have. I didn't like difficult conversations. Even till now, I'm still a work in progress, but I would not be, behave like I used to. I'll just, say what I need to say or not say, rather than just disappearing from the scene and as if, the relationship never existed. So if you're like that, this is not to condemn you. I understand wanting to avoid conflict. It can come from having had conflict in the past and being maybe faced in a situation where it ended up in abuse or manipulation, or you face the repercussions of sharing your point of view that was contrary to that of the other person, only to be met with severe consequences that you did not like, and somehow you just found yourself either stomaching the conflict without addressing it, anything that was going to maybe minimizing yourself or modifying yourself to avoid conflict, or where in a situation where you are not willing to do that, just cut off from the person entirely. I think that for a relationship that you value, difficult conversations are worth having. Now, relationships are a two-way street. So if you bring yourself to have a difficult conversation through humility and love, it can actually bring the two of you closer, or it can reveal the heart of the other party and actually save you from stringing yourself along in a relationship that only you was carrying. I had an experience of both. When Lord started to take me through this, you cannot continue to ghost people. You need to talk about what needs to be talked about. You need to put yourself in a position for people to actually want to have difficult conversations with you, not because of the fear that you might disappear from the scene. People don't want to have difficult conversations. No, you need to change that. And so I had to have like two very difficult conversations. For the very first one, this was within my family. For the very first one, it was a really tough conversation, ended up becoming really emotional. And this was the case of, make this call, have this conversation. And I didn't even know what dimension it was going to take. At the end of the day, we became much closer. It's a lot of things were even based on assumptions. And I would never have known this if I did not have that difficult conversation. While on the other side, I had that kind of experience, and the person actually cut off, "Hello, welcome, 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 welcome. It's lovely to have you. My number one listener. I'm going to find a way to give you a gift. Thank you for joining, Mom. It's beautiful to have you on the call." So, I'm talking about 7 things that your friendships might be trying to teach you. And I've given a bit of an introduction for 10 minutes, which I did not intend for it to last 10 minutes. So I said I would journey through from my teenage up until now, the lessons that I've learned and what the Lord has been teaching me, and how the relationships and friendships have shaped me into who I am today, taking accountability for where I should and allowing God to do work where He wants to. So also I'll be talking about conversations that reveal the meaning of a friendship, and that is the last part, about acceptance. Because why we struggle many times is because we refuse to accept the reality for what it is. There's a saying, I don't know if it is Bob Dylan or someone, that says, if someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And many times we don't want that, because we want people to be who we think them to be, or we want them to fulfill the potential that we've created for them, but they might not be willing or even able to give. So anyway, start from different. So the first thing your friendship might be trying to teach you: different doesn't mean wrong, but it may mean different directions. I talked about how many times naturally people gravitate towards people that are like them. You want to find something in common with someone. You want to be like your friends, but you can be similar and you can still be different, because we are all made differently. I shared that at the beginning, that even though these are my lessons, you would definitely find something that relates to your life and how we can improve your future relationships. So sometimes there really isn't a villain in the story. You simply stop seeing life the same way. So history matters, but history alone cannot sustain a relationship that no longer fits. I'll give a bit of an example. So I had a friend, when I was in uni. I think we started becoming friends in like my second year. So in my second year, I was 17, thereabout. And so we were friends, uni friends, spent time after school, listen to music. I didn't really know much of who I was anyway. So it was just a nice friend. And shortly after uni, she was like, "Oh, kind of need to get married, now it's running late." Now, mind you, we finished uni between 21 and 22, or thereabout, 23, about that. So I was thinking to myself, yes, that would be good, but I don't think it's a do or die desperate situation right now. And one of the things she said was, now she was a year older than I was. So she was like, "Oh, don't worry, when you're my age, you understand." And I started thinking to myself, she was 1 year older than me. Like, even like, what could I not understand? But anyway, that wasn't my perspective at that point in time. Yes, I was, open to life, and I was just going through a healing journey as well. I just wanted to get into work, try to discover myself and understand myself and live as myself. And after that, she just kind of cut me off, really. So we went different paths, and a few years later, somehow we started, speaking as well, and we understood things entirely differently. That, thinking about it now, but there was this shared history of, we've known each other from way back. So yes, the relationship could have still remained, but maybe not in the capacity where we were trying to steer it, or how intense, because found out we're kind of living close to each other and all of that. And I'll talk about maybe, okay, wanting to study more, she won't be interested in that. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to share similar interests, but all of your interests have to be similar. But apart from just the mundane, this is why identity is very important, knowing who you are, which I did not really know. So anyway, eventually one day, like, we had different, and I believe I was quite different, because I would laugh about anything, laugh at myself, at people's expense, and all sorts of horrible things, which I'm not exactly proud of. So one day she just said, I'm tired of this friendship or whatever, but anyone blocked me. So I was like, that's a bit intense. Like, what could have caused that? But thinking, I didn't actually like miss the friendship. I was kind of relieved when that happened. The only thing, obviously, as a human being, like I was like, oh, what exactly could have caused this? But what I do realize now is we were so different from the get-go. We wanted different things out of life, even though we had some commonalities, because when you spend time in a certain geographical location and you do similar things, you might have similar um visions that are not really yours because you're still in the process of self-discovery. We saw life entirely differently. We wanted different things out of life. But I was somehow trying to string her along to my own way, and she was trying to do that as well. Or maybe not, I don't know. So that is an example of understanding that you can have shared history, but different doesn't mean wrong. So I won't particularly say, I mean, she could narrate this entirely differently, but what I've learned from that was you need to really know who you are so that you can actually know when somebody is different from you. If you don't, you would think that you have similar interests and you want similar things, and then it turns out that that is not the case, and one day somebody will just flip out on the other, and an example of that might happen. So I've got so many stories to give about difference, but I talked about obviously the foundation of a friendship and all of that, and we've seen that in our series. So I'm not going to go into that. But if you see part one, intentionality, it breaks it down into why it's good to be intentional about who you let into your space and who you allow get into your space. It's not just because you're in the same school or you're in the same course or you like the same artist. Yes, those might be initial factors that will bring you together. But beyond that, are you really on the same path? If you're not, you might as well remain acquaintances. So number two is life changes people, and sometimes friendships change in the process. Now, a big shout out to all my friends that I've had from all of the seasons of my life that have changed as well, and that we've somehow managed to keep ourselves in each other's life and encourage each other. That has been grounding and life changing, and I do appreciate you. If you have friends that have journeyed with you through different seasons, you might want to take your time to appreciate them more than you already are, because life changes people, and sometimes the friendships you think that you carry with you to the end of your life are the very ones that fall off once your season changes. So, for example, marriage. I had a friend as well, who got married quite young, and I remember one time, when shortly after the wedding, I was I traveled into the city where she came to the city where I was living, and so we kind of met up, and all of that. And there was something she said. She said, "Oh, now that I'm married, we're no longer the same age. I'm now older than you," and I laughed it off like, oh, you're just being funny, because this is someone I've known like maybe about 10 years or so before then. But actually, maybe there are some ideologies that she was sitting with, or maybe there are some things that were being told to her. Like, I mean, whatever the case, anyway, after that, as time went on, just quiet fading, and then there was silence, So who knows what should have been processing, because obviously marriage is a new season of life. Even if she didn't verbally tell me that, I do know that new season comes with different responsibilities, and sometimes the friendships that you've had are not the ones that will carry you into that, and it's okay, as far as you're not being abused and you're not being isolated, which of course, if you're in that situation, it's okay to seek for help as well. But moving on, loss of a job. Sometimes you can lose your job, your status can change, it can come with the friends that come with that life. I saw a video online, and the lady was saying that if she's going out with lunch with her friends and they want to buy bottles of wine or whatever, and somebody's saying, oh no, I want to buy a glass, that person is not fit to be in their friend group. Now, I didn't see the whole video, but I only heard that part, and I'm thinking to myself, just because somebody is not in a position to afford a bottle, does that completely eliminate them, cause them to be eliminated from your friendship group because they don't want to spend a certain amount of money on something? So it still goes down to values, because you might get to the point where you say, okay, am I willing to have close friends that drink? It can literally come down to that, because if she did not drink and they are expecting her to pay for a drink, just excuse me, just because she's hanging out with them, then that's a whole different ball game. But it could just be that she's going through a season, hard seasons, success, they change. Life comes with all these things, beautiful things. No one can escape hard seasons. No one can escape soft seasons, hopefully. So we're always moving from one season to the next. And some people will not go with you. I'm not going to dwell too much on that because I've talked about it so much. But I'm going to leave you with this. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to change. For one of the greatest compliments that someone can give you is that you have changed. I mean, hopefully for the better. Hopefully for the better. I'm going to sip a bit of my hibiscus. So you are allowed to change. So if that is the case, then make the changes that come with it. I remember a while ago, I went through a really, really hard season. And, actually, someone I did not expect to was really, really there for me in that hard season. I really appreciated it. I thought, oh, this is going to be my quote unquote ride or die. I'm so grateful for this. This is like, I think it was probably leaning towards codependency, which is why God had to yank me out of that space. But then while God was working through the season and changing me from the inside, changing my life, improving my outcomes, visibly my outcomes, my life, physical life, opportunities started to come. This person was out of the picture. Like at some point, I thought I did something, but no. What happened was that I changed and I grew and I healed. And there are some people that will only be able to handle the wounded version of you. So it's good for you to grow and change. Some people will not be able to handle that. There's this thing that Oprah said that somebody asked her, why is Gail your best friend? Like, something of that nature. You guys are really close. Gail, that's her best friend. And she said that when she was when her level changed and she was really elevated, it was only Gail that could breathe in that air. And it's really understandable because while she was struggling or just coming up, there would have been so many people that would have been saying, oh, you can do it, not really expecting her to do it. Or maybe her success revealed some inadequacies in them that they did not want to confront. And then they felt the best way to do it was to cut her off. So having experienced that myself, you are allowed to change and never halt your growth journey just because you want to keep some certain people in your life. It's not worth it. If God is growing you, if God is changing you, move according to how he's moving you. If God is saying go to a new location, do it. If God is saying stay here when everybody's doing, do it. God is doing a work in you. And even though we cannot see the end from the beginning, it is always for good. If it is not good, God is not done. I know that for a fact. Sometimes when you don't know what's the end, it can get really heavy and stressful and confusing. But God knows what he's doing. And if you decided to trust him with your life, then trust him all the way through if he asks you to change. And if some people fall off in the process, or if some people come to you in the process, just make sure you're changing for good, right? Next is watch what happens when tables turn. So this is closely linked, and I'm just going to go through it really quickly. People reveal themselves in both your struggle and your success. And we usually talk about watching who stays when you're going through a hard time, but who can genuinely celebrate when something good happens for you. Genuinely celebrate, even if that is something that they wanted themselves. Not going to share the same story, but a different one now. So I had a really, good friend as far as I was concerned. But thinking about it now, there are ways I would have approached that relationship differently. And so, of course, went through a hard season and, it was just, a pull away. And now we're kind of reduced to sending memes on Instagram. But it might have been that I was the only one that thought that the friendship was that close because I didn't really think it through, and that's what happens in some relationships. It will just be that the good times they're just for the good times. So we struggle when we try to make those seasonal ones lifetime ones, right? So 4, generosity needs boundaries. This is a lesson that I cannot overemphasize, right? You can be generous, but not self-sacrificing. So be discerning about what you give and who you give to. Now, here's a story for you. When I was in university, I lived off campus. So when the school resumes, usually they wouldn't let the hostels be open immediately because maybe they were still trying to allocate space and all that. I didn't really know the ins and outs because I never stayed in a hostel, but I did have friends that stayed in the hostel. Now, so they wouldn't usually, because most of us came from out of town, they'd be like, oh, can we stay at your place while we wait for the hostel? I'm like, yeah, sure. If we're friends, why not? I didn't see any reason to refuse. So no boundaries, right? So coming through, staying. And then from the way that I was brought up, I felt like, oh, if people are staying at your house, you should host them, you should take care of them. So I go out of my way. Are you guys okay? Run around for breakfast, lunch, dinner. So obviously I've been given resources to sustain myself, not to sustain 10 people or 5 people. So now, one of the times I had run around, set up breakfast, everything, and then I found out that I was out of milk because the milk was available to everyone to use. And so I asked one of the people in the house, I was like, please, can you bring your milk so that we can, I already made like oats, I already made, stuff, tea, just the milk was the missing factor. And I asked her, she was like, oh no, I'm not able to. My mom bought this milk for me. And I was speechless. So I'm thinking, of course, it was my mom that also gave me money for everything. But that immediately drew my attention to the fact that I was self-sacrificing. This was not a mutual relationship. I was being used. And so anyway, that was the last time I let anyone stay over before those hostels opened or anything like that. But it was another friend of mine that said, oh, don't worry, I'm going to get the milk and share. Everyone was so stunned by that answer. So it's about defining what it is, because I thought, okay, if I have, we all have because we're all friends. But she clearly didn't see it like that. So I'm not saying you should give and start calculating when the person gives you back, but you should know how much of yourself you should give in a relationship, depending on who you are relating with. Not everyone should have the same level of access to you. We'll go to that. That's actually the next point. No matter what kind of person you are. You might say, oh, I'm naturally open. Well, that's where you learn discernment and restraint. Excuse me, because that's what will save you from running out of milk. Another story before I move on, the one about watch when tables turn, right? Another story from university. So there was this course that we used to take. I forgot what it was called, philosophy, and many people really dreaded it, and people didn't want to fail it. As a matter of fact, if anyone failed it in the first year, the gist was that you would drag that on until the final year. You would just not be released. So everyone's aim was just to make sure that they passed this course the first time around and moved on with their lives. So I had a group of friends, or when you just come to school, you're just trying to find people you get along with, sit in the same place with, and all that. And we all did this course and the exam and all of that. The results came out, so we saw our results, or we were read our results. I think that was what the lecturer did. So I had a B, someone else had a C, another person had a D and E. Now, I was happy about my B, but I couldn't really, I had to be sensitive about other people that didn't get that much good grades. But the irony is that the person that got the C lamented. And one of the things she was like, how could you get a B when we all read together? But I was, 17, 16, whatever. So I started explaining myself or something. I can't quite remember. So she just, even the people that got D and E, they were good readers. Like, I'm done with this course, so that's fine. So I told her, but we should actually be happy that no one failed this course. Oh, she got so mad. So is it because you got a B? I withdrew myself from that association, but this is just an example. So even if how could you get yourself to rejoice with someone that is having a good experience, even if you're not having that experience. You might not be able to rejoice immediately because obviously you're grieving your own loss, and you can be sensitive to the people around you, like I was, by not rejoicing too loudly and rubbing it in their face. But for someone to actually attack you for your win, it should tell you something. Anyway, I was young and foolish. I didn't learn from that, and I continued being friends. But moving on. So, number 5, closeness doesn't mean unlimited access. This ties into the boundaries I talked about. So, it's like if you're close to someone, you should still have parts of your life that you keep to yourself. There are actually parts of your life that are meant for yourself alone, and are meant for God alone. You, between you and God, maybe between you and your spouse, between you and your friends. Like, I don't think that one person can hold every aspect of you. Of course, they will vary in degrees and know more of you, but I do think that there should be some boundaries and structure depending on the friendship and relationship. Anyway, subject for another day. So what's the story for this one now? So I used to have a friend, right? Went to secondary school together, and continued all that. But one of the things that I'm going to talk about, well, after talking about like boundaries, and then I'm going to go to the next point about paying attention to what exhausts you. And so, it's quite a lovely lady, and everything. But I found out a lot that our conversations were a bit always intense. Like, it was always an argument or something. So at some point, even when I'll just be like, oh yeah, okay, when you just start minimizing your perspectives just so someone can keep quiet. So you actually have to reassess yourself. Are you the kind of person that people just agree with so that you just get out of their space? That's also not a good way to be. So anyway, now instead of limiting the contact and the interactions that we were having, I still continued with the same intensity. But then I was offloading that onto another relationship and friendship. So after whatever interactions we'll have, I'll go to another relationship and complain and say, oh, this is so intense, more or less gossiping. Now, I had to take responsibility for that. Complaining to someone else rather than addressing the relationship. It's something that I could have avoided, but I was saying that I was always avoiding conflict. So instead of addressing it, I would go on to someone else and be like, oh, this is so tough, and then go back the next day. That was just rubbish. But anyway, I had to learn from that experience. So on this fateful day, right, we were actually together, and I was just getting so drained and exhausted. Like, almost every word. If somebody makes you feel like that, don't stress them out by hanging out with them. So eventually, I think I had gone to the restroom or something like that. And then she took my phone and went to read my messages with my other friend. And of course, she saw what she was not supposed to see, me complaining about my interactions with her, which I acknowledge was horrible, because I should have just told her, or just have left her alone, avoided her altogether, not try to get relief. It's a different thing if you go through a tough situation and you talk about it, and maybe you get direction or support or guidance, or you just vent to a friend. But if you're always having to do this, there is a problem with that. You should actually take it up with the person you have the relationship with. So when she saw that, she was like, oh, I was like, well, I'm sorry that, you saw all of that, and I take responsibility for that. But I was like, why should you go to my phone and check my messages? Anyway, she says, oh, the Holy Spirit asked her to check my messages. I was like, what? So now, as far as I'm concerned, I take responsibility for doing that. This is something I should have addressed with her, or left her alone altogether. Not take the emotional burden from that relationship to somewhere else to process all of the time, more or less gossiping. Now, she, on the other hand, what led you to think that because we were close, you have unlimited access to me to read my messages and say you were sent by the Holy Spirit? No, don't use the Holy Spirit like that. And so for me, even though I had apologized and I knew that, things were not going to be the same, I just knew that I didn't want to continue the relationship. Apart from the fact that I was now relieved, somebody that is not willing to take accountability is dangerous. You could do the worst thing if you take accountability and start working on changing. It's much more safer than someone who always tries to spiritualize their bad behavior. The Holy Spirit would not tell you to invade someone's privacy like that. I mean, not in that circumstance, right? So anyway, so on my own part, not having boundaries in terms of how I process the relationship, it should have been processed with the actual person I was in a relationship with. And if there was no headway, put an end to it rather than endure the relationship to process elsewhere. And she, on the other hand, you have no business checking people's messages because you want to know what they're talking about. But anyway, that story for another day. So everyone cannot and should not see every part of you. Even Queen Esther, her husband did not know that she was a Jew until the right time. Husband. Sometimes, I'm not saying you should be secretive because someone can take this out of context and say, oh, yes, I need to be secretive. No, there are certain, you remember I said at the beginning that different kinds of relationships demand different levels of access. So you need to be discerning. Sometimes boundaries simply say, this is where I end and this is where you begin. And I found out, also another thing is if you've found yourself in situations where trying to put in boundaries were always met with opposition or, seen as if you were doing the wrong thing, you might struggle to put in boundaries. I remember, growing up and sometimes I want to shut the door just to be in my thoughts. But in the house where I grew up, they were like, no, you can't shut the doors. The doors are always left open. So at some point it's like, okay, I need some space. You not necessarily because you're doing anything, just because you just want to be in that space. So at some point I felt, okay, this is not acceptable. So it seeps into other parts of your relationships, because when you want to establish a boundary and the person says, oh no, you can't do this, then instead of moving away from that situation, you reduce some parts of yourself to accommodate that relationship because you think it's okay, because that's the experience that you've had growing up. It's not okay. If people need to establish boundaries, allow them to establish boundaries, and then you can guide them through it, because it's safe. Or if somebody's saying, oh, you must be in a relationship with me, it gets to the point where when you say no, you start feeling guilty for saying no, or you feel like you need to accommodate every request or attend everything or be there for everyone. And it just stretches you too thin and leads you into resentment. And that carries on into your other relationships as well. So just a quick recap before we do the last 2 points. 7 things your friendships may be trying to teach you. Number 1, different doesn't mean wrong, but it may mean different directions. Life changes people, and sometimes it changes friendships. Watch what happens when the tables turn. Generosity needs boundaries. Closeness does not mean unlimited access. Now to number 6. Pay attention to what repeatedly exhausts you. Pay attention to your body. Your body recognizes these difficult relationships before your mind starts to recognize them, before your brain starts to wrap your head around it. Because sometimes you say, oh yeah, I can deal with it. And it's this thing about, oh, I'm resilient and all of that. But the actual truth is that if you have to breathe and say, okay, I need to brace for impact, if you're constantly bracing for impact, probably it's not a relationship that you should always engage with. Some of them are unavoidable, but remember I said there are different degrees to especially how frequent you interact, how close you are, what level of access they have to you. So if you find out you always have to brace for impact, you're putting your nervous system under pressure, and you should probably reassess where that relationship lies in the order of priority for your life. So one difficult conversation, I'm going to point this out, doesn't necessarily mean a relationship is unhealthy, but when a pattern keeps repeating, that is information. And I talked about the other lady that was really argumentative. Like anything could be turned into an argument, and her perspective had to be the final say. The noble, wise, and mature thing is just to realize that, okay, every conversation with this person turns into an argument. Have I got space for that? The answer is no. And just gently, gently reduce the interactions and keep them to hi and hello. Not continually engage, continually get exhausted, go and vent elsewhere, and cycle continues. There was no need for me to go through that. There was no need for me to do that. Sometimes when a relationship ends and what you feel is actually relief, is a sign that you've been much more than what you know. So I'm going to say again that one difficult conversation. In the beginning of this video, I talked about the importance of difficult conversations and how God used three actually very key difficult conversations to not improve my relationships and show me the heart of one of the people. It was through yielding into going through and embracing that conflict. So sometimes God wants you to embrace conflict so that because he wants to improve the relationship that you have with that particular person. And of course, this depends on the way they respond to you. So before I move to the final point, I realized I was constantly engaging with someone who exhausted me and then going to another friend to recover. Not healthy. If you're in that cycle, you need to pull up your boundaries and know the level of access that you give to whoever is exhausting you, be it whether it's by anything. This example is being argumentative. If you love being argumentative and if you love arguing and if your friend loves it, oh well and good. It could be comparison. It could be the person belittling your wins. It could be anything, and you find out that you have to diminish your core essence just to be able to accommodate that person. It's not worth it. A lot of learning that I've been doing regarding this for a while now. You can check out Dr. Caroline Leaf. She talks about all of these things, how relationships impact your brain, looks into the concept of neuroplasticity and all of that. Is very, very intriguing for me. And I realize a lot of things. One of the things that excites me most about most of our work is the fact that you can actually remain young as far as you keep novelty. So look for something. It doesn't have to be drastically changing your routine. It could be a new piece of information. It could be switching up your routine a little bit. These are the things that keep you young and vibrant. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about 7 things that your friendships may be trying to teach you. Now, number 7, believe people. And believe what the relationship is showing you. Don't say, oh no, they did this, but I know they meant this. They did this. Believe actions over intentions. Believe words over thoughts. Oh, they said this, but I know they were thinking this. No. Believe. This is the one I said, acceptance. A lot of things will be our lives if we just accepted things for what they are, what they were. I forgot what this prayer is called now. That says, Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change the things I can, and something like that. So it's really important to know, because many times we want to project our expectations of people onto them. Somebody has shown you who they are over and over again. Instead of just accepting them, we keep on complaining. They do this, they are like this, they do this, they're like this. That is who they are. So you have to accept it and then categorize how much access they will have to you. So if that particular action or behavior is causing you to be exhausted, maybe you want to reassess the level of closeness and access that they have to you, so that you don't end up venting all the time for no reason. Believe people for who they are. I can't stress this enough. So you don't have to argue with someone's definition. I had someone say to me a few days ago, so I don't have any deep friendships. And that's okay, or something like, thank God I don't have, or I don't do difference, or something like that. Now this is a friend of mine, obviously, but this piece of information has helped to direct the course of the relationship so far, because going forward as well, because I have to understand that no matter the level of access or communication that I get from this person, they have explicitly said that they're incapable of any kind of deep friendships. So I have to allocate a portion of my mind that is not too dear to avoid requesting from them something that they have clearly said that they are not capable of doing. Same thing with a relationship. Someone might say, "Oh, you know, I just want to be friends," but you may probably want them to be a partner. They've already told you what they want. Even if you spent your time acting like a partner, they are probably not going to change their minds, and you just feel exhausted, like, oh, why did they act like this when they said this? They've already told you what they wanted out of it. So it's better for you to believe them, to avoid stories that touch. So you don't have to convince someone to give you something they have already told you they don't give. You don't have to keep asking for a relationship to become something it has consistently shown you it isn't. It's just like someone that consistently disappoints you or consistently comes late. You have to come to the point where you accept that this person is never going to be early. So it's either I make my own way, or I just not go without them, or not even inculcate them at the top of my plan for your own well-being. Otherwise, you'll be angry all the time and they're just going to apologize, but they're never going to change. So you actually have to believe when people show you who they are, believe them. People say, "Oh, sorry, I don't have the time to check my messages." That's good. That's absolutely fine. You don't have the time. Don't start getting mad when they don't. They've simply told you that they don't want to make time for you to be the priority. So accept it and allocate the space that is assigned to them. So maybe you might have to do. People go from being confidants into friends, and from friends into acquaintances. It's not a crime. Remember, I said you are allowed to change. So as we bring this 7 lessons to an end, I hope there's so much more, obviously, but these are the ones I've put together for this particular live stream, and I hope that you've enjoyed them. I want to leave you with a few questions I want you to think about and ruminate. Love with reserve. That's a good way to look at it. Just always leave room for that, so you don't become bitter or something. So I'm going to leave you with a few questions I want you to think about. If you want to write them down, I'm going to take it really slow. So maybe the question to ask, remember I said this is just what I've learned from my journey, the parts that I needed to adjust, how I need to approach things differently, not project onto people, open up my mind a bit more, learn when somebody's showing you who they are, take their actions for it. So maybe the question is not to ask, oh, who are my real friends? Because whenever people tell any story about a friendship, it's always how someone was so bad or this and that. People hardly say the part that they played, but it actually takes 2. So the person might have been doing a lot of things that were maybe crossing boundaries. But the truth is that you let them. So it has to come to the point where you double down into your identity. And what is your identity? Understanding that who God made, you are important to God, and no one that God made should have to have their boundaries constantly violated, be abused, or go through anything that diminishes them. So once you come to that realization and realize and know that you are precious in God's eyes, that's the first wake-up call, and ask God to strengthen you to make the necessary changes in whatever relationship you find yourself, if they are dangerous and if they are not good for you. So it always takes 2. The moment you say it's enough is enough. Even the Bible says in Exodus, when God was saying to Moses, like, today will be the first day of the day for you. If you decide now that you guys are going to leave Egypt, that is the first day. So I understand it might not be that easy, and it is never easy, but God is able to strengthen you. You just have to come to the point where you say, you know what, I'm done with this, I need to make adjustments, and then God will help you. It could be gradual, could be sudden, whatever the case is be, but I'm sure that God will help you if you ask him to. So maybe the question is not really who are my real friends. Maybe it is, what have my friendships been teaching me about myself? I know I shared that. She taught me that I avoided conflict too much, and I had to dig down into the reason why that is and embrace that. Still a work in progress, but I'm happy with that now. So what are your friendships teaching you about yourself? Have you learned to celebrate people without comparing yourself to them? We are all on different time calendars according to God's timing. We are all on different races. There's nothing like, God is working with each of us individually. All of the things that he has planned for you to come to pass. We often forget to do this. So have I learned that generosity doesn't require unlimited access? Boundaries are important. Have I learned to say no without feeling guilty? Yeah, so saying no to giving something is different from saying no in a relationship. Saying no in a friendship. I'm not available for that. That actually took me a long time to be able to do that, because it feels like, I need this done, and before you know it, you don't even know who you are anymore. So have you learned that someone can be a good person and still not be a good friend for you? And you could be a good person and you're not a good friend for someone, which is why they are allowed to exit from your life if they feel like you're no longer on the same path. Have you learned to recognize when a relationship is changing, and instead of constantly trying to return it to what you used to be? Every one of us should know one of those people that are always in the past, that don't want people to grow up. Always say, oh, I miss when, we were this. I mean, every time they're always talking about the past. Sometimes, all of the time actually, because we are changing, sometimes our relationships will change, even with ourselves. Like over the past few years, I've had to learn to be more compassionate to myself, to understand that rest is not a reward. A lot of that can have to do with your wiring and your upbringing, but it's all a learning curve. So if the relationship you have with yourself is changing, how much more the relationship you have with others? So the goal is not to hold on to every friendship that we've ever had. That is not the goal. The goal is to become better friends because of the ones we've had. Not measuring every friendship by how long it has lasted, but by what it gave, what it revealed, and what it taught you. Learning how to love people, honor ourselves, and know when the shape of the relationship needs to change. I'll end this with a story. I saw a video online, and the ladies were saying, jealousy is very tough. Initially, I agreed with the beginning part, but then I started listening in, and she was like, the friends I've had now are the friends I've had from way back. When you get new friends, that's when things start to get tricky and complicated. That is their experience. However, sometimes history with someone is not enough reason for them to go with you to your next season. Moses had history in Egypt. He grew up with Pharaoh. He was in the palace. But they were not for that deliverer season of his life. He had to go into the wilderness for 40 years to be able to come back as a deliverer. If he had strung those friendships along, because clearly, even if he had to run away because he killed someone, they could have still found a way. He was a prince. But then that relationship couldn't continue. So when I say friendship, someone might say, oh, family. No, it's the same. You can be in the same family with someone and they will not be your friend. And if somebody can be like your cousin or your sister and they can be your friend, they are two, so they don't exist independently of each other. You can have someone that, oh, I love you as a sister, but when you're not just my friend, and it's okay. Then the dynamic and the relationship we have with them will be different. So Every friendship you've had is not shouldn't be that's why people struggle, because when a season is over and it looks like everyone is going on different paths, they say, oh, we have history, and the person's like, yeah, we have history, but I need to do something else, and they say, oh, the person switched up. No, sometimes, but other times, if you're lucky, you evolve together, you grow together, you go through seasons together, and it looks different each time, and the love is still there. So I hope that you have enjoyed this episode, and that you reflect on the questions that I've asked, and that these 7 lessons that I've shared inspire you to be yourself and to be the best friend you can be. Have a beautiful weekend. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.